just a few hours a day. The rest of their time devoted to socializing and other leisure activities.
The Machiganga certainly are able to meet all of their needs with 6 to 8 hours of work, and that leaves a lot of time.
Alan Johnson found it hard to leave the tranquil world of the Machiganga and return home.
And it was a very strange feeling. Here I was walking in West Los Angeles down the street, and I was in a kind of time warp where everybody around me was moving extremely fast, sort of like a surrealistic scene from a movie or something, where I was just really slow and really comfortable, and all around me people were hurrying and scurrying.
Classical Western civilization shared the belief that leisure was important to develop a community and to foster an understanding of life.
For the Greeks, no doubt, work is for being free and doing the arts of freedom, liberal arts, writing, speaking, conversation.
An expert on classical philosophy, Dr. Benjamin Honeycutt teaches leisure studies. He works hard at it, but not always long, often leaving campus early to spend time with his children.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. I think that work has become a modern religion. We answer the traditional religious questions. Who am I? Where am I going? What does it all mean for me? What must I do to be saved? All of these traditional religious questions are now answered increasingly with work.
Ben Honeycutt believes that we've turned the wisdom of antiquity upside down, wrong side up.
Before the 20th century, work was a means to an end. The 20th century has reversed that, and work becomes an end in itself. And consequently, leisure is transformed. Instead of being the purpose of work, I'm working for something better. The transformation, the metamorphosis occurs. There's nothing better. Leisure, then, is important only in service to work. It's trivialized. It amounts to laying in the hammock or collapsing in front of the television set. All of the active components, the community involvement, the time spent with children, for example, all of those things are made less important by virtue of the importance, the exploding importance of work.
Even serfs in the Middle Ages toiled less than we do. Experts estimate that an average workday in medieval Europe was 9 or 10 hours long, longer in summer, shorter in winter. However, agricultural labor was often performed at a leisurely pace, and it was abandoned entirely during scores of holy days. At the beginning of the Renaissance, religious holidays in some parts of Europe amounted to more than 150 a year. But in Benedictine monasteries like this one in England, a new ideology, glorifying work and demanding strict observation of time, had already taken root. To work is to pray, said St. Benedict. Idleness is the enemy of the soul. Therefore, at fixed times, he said, the brothers ought to be occupied in manual labor, and again at fixed times, in sacred reading. Benedict said that even bodily functions had to be performed at certain scheduled set times. So if you were a medieval monk, if you had to go, you had to wait. Till when? Till a bell, or in the late Middle Ages, a new invention called the clock proclaimed the appointed hour.
When you go to any medieval town now, you see that town clock. It became the centerpiece for a new way of organizing society. And once you could organize people by putting them on regular hours and minutes, you could get them into an industrial frame of mind, which requires standardization, optimization of time, predictability of outcomes. That all goes with an industrial frame of mind.
In the more competitive world of trade and commerce that followed the Renaissance, time became money. Manufacturers began seeking ways to produce their wares more quickly. Here at England's famous Wedgwood Pottery Factory, one of the first assembly lines was developed in the 18th century. The process still operates in much the same manner today, with each craftsperson down the line performing a specific task, a time-saving measure. The Industrial Revolution made it possible to turn out textiles and other goods in a fraction of the time that was formerly required. Benjamin Franklin marveled at the efficiency of the new machines.
If every man and woman would work for 4 hours each day on something useful, that labor would procure all the necessaries and comforts of life.
4 hours. But during the 19th century, many factory owners forced their employees to work 14 hours a day instead.
This new building behind me was built in 1806 by a man called Benjamin Gott. He was a local merchant. Benjamin Gott was probably a little in advance of his time. He certainly was a very progressive person. And he laid down some rules when he put his mill in. One that he didn't want to employ children who were younger than 10 years old. And no child would work longer than 16 hours in a day.
Not only were hours longer, most holidays were abolished. Only on Sundays were the workers free.
And people look at that period of time and they say, wow, we've had tremendous progress since then. We're down to a 40-hour week, roughly speaking. And look at all the great things that our economic system has brought us. Not only has it made us wealthier, but it's also given us a lot more free time. What they forget is that if you look just a little bit farther back in history, the 18th and 19th centuries were absolutely unusual because they were a period in which working hours had already roughly doubled.
From the beginning, workers resisted these new demands for their time. Shorn of their old religious holidays, they invented a new one, St. Monday, after a Sunday night in a bar like this one.
Monday they would wake up with a hangover and come in late. And that was often known as the privilege of St. Monday. It was a way of having Monday morning at least off.
We mean to make things over. We're tired of
Eventually, individual resistance gave way to organized rebellion.
on and there and hour for thought. We want to feel the sunshine and we want to smell the flowers. We are sure that God has willed it and we mean to have 8 hours. We're summoning our forces from the shipyard, shop and mill. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will, 8 hours for work, 8 hours
In the
for
United
rest,
States, large-scale protests first erupted in May of 1886, when 500,000 workers marched for an 8-hour workday.
The demand for shorter hours was, and specifically for the 8-hour day, was the demand of the labor movement in the 1880s. And I think in no city more than in Chicago did it reach larger proportions.
At that time, this Chicago street corner was known as Haymarket Square. Few passers-by realized that the most significant event in the struggle for shorter hours occurred right here. On May 4th, 1886, a confrontation between protesters and police turned violent when someone, no one to this day knows who, threw a bomb. Shooting broke out and several policemen were killed. 9 leaders of the 8-hour movement were put on trial for the killings. Despite the lack of evidence, 4 of the accused were sent to the gallows. Thousands of angry mourners attended their funeral.
The trial has long since been regarded as one of the most notoriously biased in American history. The Haymarket Martyrs were the first martyrs of the struggle for the 8-hour day and were recognized as such throughout the world.
But their dream would not be realized until 1938, when the 8-hour day and the 40-hour week were signed into law by President Roosevelt. And by then, the American labor movement was already fighting for a 6-hour day.
We propose that the hours of work in America shall be reduced to the point where the slack of unemployment shall be taken up, and for that reason we stand unflinchingly for the application of the 6-hour day and the 5-day week in industry.
It was the heart of the Great Depression. With more than a quarter of the population jobless, the call went out to share the work by reducing the work week to 30 hours. You won't find the date in most history books, but you can imagine the excitement in U.S. labor circles when word came out of this building on April 6, 1933, that a bill had passed the U.S. Senate making the official work week in the United States 30 hours, anything else overtime. That was over 60 years ago.
This is the high water point of the politics of shorter hours. Never before or since has the issue come to such a head.
But the bill died in the House of Representatives, and the National 30 Hours campaign died with it. Some businesses, though, had already adopted the 30-hour week voluntarily. Battle Creek, Michigan, the breakfast cereal capital of the world. During the Depression, it was the scene of a remarkable experiment. In 1930, the W.K. Kellogg Company took bold action to reduce unemployment.
Mr. Kellogg instituted a 6-hour work shift, shifting from people being on duty 8 hours a day to 6 hours a day. And that effectively put, depends on the numbers you look at, but that effectively put 200 to 400 additional people on the payrolls during the Depression.
The experiment was an immediate success. Productivity rose. Within 2 years, Kellogg was able to pay his 6-hour workers what he'd previously paid them for 8 hours. He also put money into recreational opportunities for his employees: playgrounds and parks, swimming pools, nature centers, and libraries.
He was optimistic about the workers. He thought that this leisure would enrich the family, would enrich community life, and so forth. He was ahead of his time, a welfare capitalist with some radical ideas, the most radical of which is leisure. Leisure is the finest product, short hours, the finest product of capitalism, not economic growth, perpetual economic growth, not full-time work, expanding forever, but expanding leisure would for Kellogg be the flower, the crowning achievement of capitalism.
But after Kellogg retired, the company waged a 40-year campaign to return to 8-hour shifts.
The new managers thought 6 hours was too expensive. It cost, in terms of fixed costs, it cost the fringe benefits.
That all culminated in 1985 when the company and the union agreed to end the 6-hour workday in light of the tremendous competitive situation that the company found itself in trying to compete in a global market.
Oh yeah, Kellogg's wasn't our whole life while we were working there.
Back in the 1950s, when Chuck and Julia Blanchard both worked on the 6-hour shift at Kellogg's, they were often photographed as model employees.
As I understand what you said, you shared not only your job at Kellogg's, but also your home, the duties at home.
Yes, yes.
Oh, yeah.
We were way ahead of our time in that Chuck took care of the kids, and he helped with the housework.
Dr. Benjamin Honeycutt has interviewed scores of former Kellogg's employees about the 6-hour workday. More than 3/4 of them remember it fondly.
You had more time off, that was for sure. And like one fellow said, when you got out of there, you wasn't all wore out.
Ida Sides was still working on the 6-hour shift in 1985 when it ended.
I was really sorry that they phased it out. As a matter of fact, the final day that they phased it out, we had a funeral. And some of the employees, they made a makeshift casket.
Ida even wrote a poem for the occasion.
Farewell, good friends, old 6 hours. Now you're gone, and we're all so blue. Get out those vitamins and give your doctor a call, 'cause old 8 hours has got us all.
This is the kitchen of tomorrow, a press-button dream coming true for Mrs. Housewife. All sorts of...
If shorter hours through work sharing was the theme of the 1930s, shorter hours through technology was the promise of the 1950s.
What's for dinner? Consult the menus on pictures and dish up something new for a change. Hummingbird wings on toast, maybe. And look where the toaster is. A wave of the hand and presto, down comes a hidden cabinet with the dishes. Mama will feel like a fairy princess with a magic wand in a place like this.
Automation enters the nursery in this playful prediction from Budapest. One nurse at a central control panel will be able to manage a whole brigade of babies, and the tykes will spend happily antiseptic infancies untouched by human hands. They'll even be tucked into their cribs by remote control.
Whatever needed to be done, a machine would do it for us. Experts predicted a 22-hour work week by 1985, 14 by the year 2000. Maybe it could have happened, but it didn't.
The performance of the U.S. economy since the Second World War provides us with really what is an incredible possibility. For every hour worked, we can now produce twice as much in that hour as we could 40 years ago. And what's happened is that we've put all of that economic progress into producing more things. So our consumption has doubled and our working hours have not fallen at all. In fact, our working hours have risen.
I know we're running out of time, but stay with us just a while longer because there is some good news. There are all kinds of things that people are doing to find more time, things you can do to find more time for yourself, things we can think about as a society. So please, just a little while longer, stay with us.
We could be making, I think, quite a bit more money than we are now. But we don't need the money. You know, we've got all the things that we want. You know, I'd rather have time to read a book.
What time do you think?
I'd say 7:30 at the earliest. You might even want to make it later.
Frank Leverine and Wanda Urbanska are the authors of Simple Living, the story of their personal odyssey in search of more time. 8 years ago, they were living the fast life in Los Angeles. Frank was a screenwriter, Wanda a newspaper reporter. They were succeeding in challenging, exciting careers, but they never had time for each other.
There was always a sense that we were running out of time. I mean, we couldn't get things done, all the things. I remember getting up in the morning and writing every day. I'd write a whole list of things that I had to do.
We saw each other on Sundays, and that was about it. A lot of times we wouldn't see each other until 10 or 11 at night. It was really a one-dimensional life. Work was our life, and we didn't really have time for our relationship. We didn't have time for any kind of volunteer work, or even, we felt like we didn't even have time to recycle. We felt like that was, you know, that would take too much of our time to do something simple like that.
Wanda and Frank made a bold move back to the family orchard in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where Frank had grown up. He took over the orchard from his parents, who were no longer able to run it. It was a very risky proposition because the orchard was $125,000 in debt and losing money every year.
But
These look like they've been damaged by something. See right
Making the orchard profitable again meant frequent bouts of hard work. But it was almost a relief compared to the relentless pressure of Los Angeles.
The nice thing about an orchard is that it's a very seasonal thing, and once the apples are picked and sold, say by the 1st of November, you can really take your time getting the pruning done and the other jobs that need to be done. Being back here at the orchard and having a lot of free time has allowed me to take care of Dad in his old age. Dad is 85 now, and he's pretty much lost use of his left arm. And so he can't bathe himself, he can't do any errands, he can't really change clothes, those kinds of things. I really love my dad, and it's just nice to be able to do something like that for him, I think at this stage in his life when he's real vulnerable.
You remember what your first car was years ago? Yeah. Their new, slower-paced life also allows Frank and Wanda to be actively involved in the nearby community of Mount Airy.
I was born in Mount Airy, North Carolina. Proud of it. It's the hometown of Andy Griffith, and is somewhat the basis for the Andy Griffith Show.
So you knew Andy Griffith way back then?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
What holds that community together, we've both discovered, really, is having time for people.
Frank and I don't feel like we're dropouts. We're really drop-ins. You can't snap your fingers and have community. I mean, you do have to invest time. You do have to be a regular participant.
One Saturday each month, residents of Mount Airy bring their recyclables to a city park. Frank and Wanda are regular volunteers.
And it's a wonderful sort of social occasion. Everybody feels so good when they're taking the time to recycle, and feels like they're doing the right thing.
Today, Frank Leverine and Wanda Urbanska are living on far less money than they did in Los Angeles. They're downshifters, part of a growing group of people who are deliberately choosing to sacrifice money for time.
In many cases, this is a real struggle. It's an emotional and obviously practical struggle, financially and everything else. It's not something that happens overnight, and you got to really want to do it to make it work. But it can work if a person is committed to it, just as, you know, committed in the same way maybe they once were to climbing a career ladder.
I think that most people can make choices about consumption that actually will, in many cases, increase the amount of